Over the Christmas holidays, I've been building up a Tamiya TT02R, which is run quite commonly at Bedworth and I think throughout the country in the kind of Tamiya iconic entry-level classes in on-road clubs. I've been building one up to try and get a bit of experience of the car so I can give better advice to it when we get newbies come along with these cars. This one here has got most of the option parts on that we allow at Bedworth. Different clubs may allow different options, so I suggest checking the various rules that are allowed where you race. At Bedworth, the option parts that we allow on this car are allowed primarily for durability purposes. Obviously, the TT02 is quite a budget car. It's not really intended for racing. And to make it durable enough for racing, it does require a few option parts on it really to make it robust enough. So the parts are mostly for robustness and also a few things on it to make it handle better on a racing track, to make it a bit easier to drive, a bit more stable, a bit more consistent in racing conditions. There's not really much on it that we allow purely to make it go faster in a straight line. It's really to make it easy to live with as a racing car. So those are the parts that we allow, and they're the ones that I'll cover. Like I say, different tracks may allow different things, so check what's allowed where you're racing. If you're just looking to get into racing, I'd say before you spend any money on option parts, the best thing to do if you've got a car already is just turn up with the car you've got and race what you've got and see if racing is for you before you spend a load of money on option parts. If you haven't yet got a car, then probably, if you can get hold of the TT02R, then that's the perfect car to get started with, as it comes with a whole bunch of option parts thrown in with it for not much more money than the base TT02. So that's the ideal Tamiya car to start with. The slight caveat to that is the R only seems to be available maybe once or twice a year. I think Tamiya look like they do them in batches. It's available for a month or so, and then you can't get them again the rest of the year. So it's not always easy to get hold of. So if you can get yourself an R, that is great. If not, start off with the base TT02 and then add option parts to it as you get more experience and as you stick with racing. So in today's video, I'm going to cover the various option parts that we allow at Bedworth and that I think are allowed quite commonly elsewhere to make the car kind of suitable for racing, and I'll try and cover them in order of preference, really, of the order that you'd add them to a car to make them most suitable for racing. So starting off with the first thing that we tend to allow is front universal joint drive shafts and the metal outdrives on the diff that you need to go with that. So the standard outdrives that you get with the TT02 are a dog bone style drive shaft with then a separate axle, and that works okay. But the problem is on the front end, when you get a lot of steering lock on, what happens if you take a slight bash on the wheel, which causes the suspension to deflect? What tends to happen is the dog bone pops out of the axle, and then the dog bone goes pinging down the track, and you're down to a three-wheel drive car. And we see this happen fairly regularly at Bedworth, and we find the little dog bones lying out on the track. And even the TT02R comes with dog bones on the front, so this is a metal dog bone. The base TT02 comes with plastic dog bones, but the design is fundamentally the same. It's a separate axle and dog bone. So one of the first upgrades I'd put on a TT02 of any type is to get a universal joint on the front end, where effectively, it's a little bit hard to see here, but effectively the axle and then the transmission joint are all one piece. So even when you've got steering lock on, if you take a whack on this corner, it's all going to stay attached. There's nothing that's going to go pinging along the track when you take a hit. This car here, I put the Yeah Racing joints on it. You can just about see the Yeah Racing logo on those ones. They're not particularly an expensive part, and they seem to be pretty decent quality. The fit and finish on them was quite decent when I fitted them to this car. The only thing that you need extra to go with them is the metal diff outdrives, as they're a smaller size pin on the inboard end than the standard plastic dog bones, so they won't work with the standard plastic diff outdrive. So you need the metal outdrives that Yeah Racing do to go with them. But it's a fairly inexpensive upgrade, and it's probably the first thing I would start with when upgrading a TT02, just for durability really. Otherwise you'll find it quite frustrating. Each time you have a bit of an impact on a corner, you'll find yourself losing front dog bones, and that's it's not helpful. You know, the first thing you need to do as a newbie to racing is finish races, because that's how you get track time. It's how you improve. And if you're DNFing races because of losing front drive shafts, it's going to get quite frustrating. So for, I think, a cost of a total of about £20, you can replace the front diff out drives and drive shafts with UJs, and that'll make the car a lot more robust. You can do the rears as well, but I'd say that's less critical because the rears don't turn. You don't tend to find the rears pinging out quite so much, so it's not quite so critical on the rear. I'd say that's something to worry about further down the line. It doesn't really matter quite so much. You can stick with the kit ones on the rear for a little longer. Next up on the option parts list I'd consider would actually be a better servo saver. So the TT02 does come with a servo saver, which is the little bit that goes between the servo and the steering linkage. So it does come with a servo saver to protect your servo gears in the event of a crash. But the servo saver that comes with the kit isn't very good. It has a lot of friction built into it, and what you find is when you steer, the servo saver doesn't return to the same point each time. There's a lot of friction in it. So particularly on an outdoor track with some larger straights, it can be very hard to get the car running in a straight line, and it's nothing due to the radio gear or the driver or the car. It's purely because there's so much friction in the servo saver, it doesn't centre properly each time. So a really good cheap upgrade is, before upgrading servo or radio gear, is just a better servo saver. So I'd recommend a good starting point would be this Kimbro black servo saver. It comes with 3 different inserts to fit each of the different sized servo outputs. I think these cost about £8-9, and that will be a huge improvement into the sort of drivability of the car, just by getting it tracking straight each time. You'll actually be able to set your trim straight, and the car will actually stay running straight each time. So that'd be one of the first things I'd consider as an upgrade. You do want to run a servo saver on these cars. I wouldn't replace the saver with a solid arm, as if you fit a solid arm to the car instead of a saver, you're going to be putting your servo gears at risk, or potentially start breaking suspension arms, suspension parts, because if you have an impact, the force has to go somewhere, and with a servo saver, all of the force can go into the spring on the servo saver. If you remove that, then the force is going to start going into suspension arms and places like that, which on these cheaper cars like the Tamiya isn't a good idea. You want something in the system that can give, so I'd suggest the Kimbro servo saver. The ultimate servo saver is this one here. It's the X-Ray servo saver off the X-Ray range of cars. This is it's a brilliant servo saver. It's very stiff, so it means the car does exactly what you tell it to when it's going around the track, but it has some give in it to protect the servo gears in the car. The problem with this X-Ray servo saver is it's over £20, so it's quite an expensive upgrade. So I'd say as a starting point, this Kimbro one is more than good enough. We ran that for years when we were running this kind of car back in the day. So I'd get started with this Kimbro servo saver. I'll stick a link to the part number in the comments. The next thing I would consider on the upgrade parts is a handling and durability one. It's these aluminium 3-degree rear hubs. So it does 2 things. The first thing is it changes the suspension geometry. So the standard TT02 comes with 0-degree rear hubs. What that means is that the rear hubs, this bit here, basically pointing in a dead straight line towards the front of the car. So it has 0 degrees rear toe in. Unfortunately, that means the car has very little rear end grip, as rear toe in is one of the most powerful adjustments on an RC car for giving rear end grip. So the standard hubs on the standard TT02 tend to make the car quite oversteery, quite tail happy. Makes the car quite hard to drive. So the TT02R comes included with these 3-degree rear hubs, which is really nice. They're a really good option part. So it's one of the benefits of the R. But if you bought a base TT02, then it'd be one of the first things to get as an option part. You can get them from Racing. You don't have to buy the genuine Tamiya ones, which are quite an expensive part. I'd get the Racing 3-degree blue rear hubs, and they're also a lot stronger than the kit rear plastic parts. It does tend to be a part that breaks fairly regularly on these cars. They're quite exposed on the rear end to impacts. The plastic ones do tend to break a fair amount, so they're a good durability upgrade as well as a handling part. Typically on our race TCs, we'll change the rear toe by maybe 1 degree, and that will be quite a significant adjustment. So going from 0 to 3 will be a huge upgrade on the handling. It will just make the car so much easier to drive. It'll have so much more rear end grip at just every part of the corner. So it's definitely quite high up on the list of option parts to put on the car. You'll notice so far I've not put anything on it that's going to make it go faster in a straight line, because really when you're starting out, those sort of faster in a straight line things are quite low down the list. That's not where most of the lap time comes from. On a typical track like Bedworth, say, you spend maybe 2 seconds on the straight, and then you spend 16 seconds going around the infield, even as a decent driver with one of these cars. So trying to find a tenth or two to go down the straight a little quicker isn't really very significant, but you can potentially find seconds a lap around the infield section. So that's really where we focus on trying to find the lap time. So that's where most of the option parts and also on driving is where all of the lap time comes from. So those are the things we're looking at. Likewise, next up, the next option part I'd be looking at are a set of oil dampers for the car. Again, if you've managed to get hold of a TT02R, it does come with a set of oil dampers. So these are a coilover spring, and then inside the shock absorber it's oil filled with a piston moving through the oil, which damps out the spring movement and makes the car a lot easier to drive. It will corner flatter, corner more consistently. It will settle back quicker after bumps and curbs. So the TT02R comes with these, but if you bought a base TT02, then it just has it has springs on each corner, but it doesn't have any damping. So it'll be one of the first things I'd consider as an upgrade for the base TT02. I've done another video covering the shocks in a bit more detail, but what you want are a set of shock absorbers that measure about 50mm between the two mounting points. So probably if we go to the rear end, it'll be a little bit easier to see. But basically you want 50mm between the upper and lower balls. So between there and there wants to be about 50mm, as you can see on the vernier here. That's the kind of length you're looking for, and that will give the ideal ride height and also sort of up travel for sort of on-road racing on standard UK kind of indoor or outdoor track. 50mm is about the perfect length for a TT02 that's got that kind of standard wishbone, standard shock towers on it. That's about the perfect length. A little bit longer than that is fine, so 50-52mm will be okay. You don't want to go any shorter than that, otherwise you won't be able to get enough droop or enough ride height from the car. So that's the kind of length you're looking at if you're buying shock absorbers off of eBay. You don't need to spend a fortune on shocks, and Bedworth, we do have a price limit on the shocks to stop people putting expensive £60 TRF shocks on the car. But a set of oil dampers will make a big difference to how the car handles. And often you'll get multiple sets of springs with the shocks as well, so you can then start to tune the handling a little bit with softer and stiffer springs to tune the car to your liking. So definitely high up on the list of things to stick on as option parts. So the TT02R just comes with these plastic shocks, which, having changed the seals out for some better seals, are actually a really nice shock. They're nice and smooth. They seem to be holding the oil all right. They're probably not quite as robust as an aluminium shock. If you were to take a hard hit, I think there probably is a risk of the shock kind of tearing itself apart. So ideally, probably an aluminium set would be better. But I think as a place of getting started, they're not a bad set of shocks. I've certainly built worse shocks in my time. Probably once you've done all of those things and you've been racing for a little while, at that point you might be starting to feel like the car is maybe a little slow in a straight line. You've got it handling well, you're carrying a bit more corner speed, and you're noticing that maybe some of the other racers are a bit quicker on the straight. So at that point it might be worth starting to consider a couple of speed upgrades. The two things we allow on that at Bedworth, and I know that they allow in King of Clubs, are the speed gear set and the aluminium motor mount to allow you to get the right motor positions for gearing. So the speed gear set just allows you to change the spur gear for kind of standard fitment spur gears. And then the aluminium motor mount gives you a bit of cooling, holds the motor mount more rigidly, and I think increases the range of gearing that you can get onto it. So they're two separate parts. You'll find the part numbers for these on our SportsTC rules on the Bedworth website, and I think you'll find them on the King's Club's rules as well. But it's two separate parts. I'd suggest once you've got the speed gear set, fitting a standard 48 dp spur gear to the car, and then you can use standard 48 dp pinions. You'll get a much bigger range of pinion gears than if you stick with the standards pitch gears. Tamiya use a 0.6 pitch gear, so a slightly different pitch, i.e. the distance between each tooth is different on Tamiya gears than it is on kind of standard gearing. So personally, I'd suggest going to 48 dp gears, which is what you can do once you've got the speed gear set, because it allows a standard fit spur gear to be put onto it. So I think this car here, I fitted a 70 tooth spur gear and I think a 33 tooth pinion gear, both in 48 dp, and that gives a suitable kind of gear ratio for the Bedworth track, which is a kind of a medium size outdoor track. Like I say, they're number 5 on my list of option parts, not number 1. I know as a beginner, making it go fast in a straight line is often number 1 on the list of option parts, but I think until you've got the car handling well and got a few race meetings under your belt, it's not worth trying to make it go faster in a straight line, as it just means you'll arrive faster to the scene of the accident and probably break more bits. So get the car handling well first and get to the stage where you're finishing races consistently without breaking parts. And then it's time to look at making it go maybe a little quicker. Next up on our list of option parts is a fairly cheap one, and a relatively minor one, but it does tend to help durability a bit, and it's these aluminium drive hexes, these blue hex shaped parts here on all 4 corners. Probably see it a bit easier on the front against the black plastic hubs. And these just allow you to tighten your wheel nuts up a lot tighter. The kit parts of these are plastic, and the problem is if you tighten your wheel nuts up too much against the plastic hexes, the hexes tend to kind of deform and they kind of squidge up against the hubs and the pins, and the drivetrain binds up. But by running an aluminium wheel hex, you can tighten your wheel nuts up as much as you like, and you're not going to deform anything, and it means you're not going to suffer with the wheels falling off. So I definitely recommend these as a kind of a nice cheap upgrade for durability, really, just making sure that your wheels are staying attached to the car. One of those things, a little down the line, once you've been racing a little while, if you're finding keeping the wheels attached to the car all the time is tricky, this is something that will help with that. These are a fairly cheap part. I think these are from Fast Tracks. They cost about £9 for the set of 4, so not an expensive part, but they do make working on the car a bit easy. You can just clamp your wheel nuts up nice and tight and know that you're going to finish the race. Getting back to handling type stuff, this car I fitted the adjustable upper links on, so that's the upper camber links here on all 4 corners, so front and rear, to allow us to adjust the camber. I wouldn't say adjustable camber as such is really necessary on this kind of car, but the problem is that the fixed upper links that the car comes with only give the car 0 degrees camber, so the wheel is dead vertical on all 4 corners, which unfortunately isn't very good for the handling. If the wheel is vertical kind of when the car's stationary, when the car goes around the corner, unfortunately the wheel, if we're starting with the wheel like that, then as the car goes around the corner, the wheel is going to deflect kind of outwards, and you're going to end up with positive camber, and that's going to cause the car to slide sideways. It's going to slide outwards away from the corner. You're going to lose grip. So to get some camber on the car, the only way we can do it is to get these adjustable upper links to allow us to put a couple of degrees of camber on, so that we start with the wheel cambered in slightly towards the corner, so then when we go around the track, as the tyre and the wheel and the suspension and everything deflect, we've still got a bit of camber on the car, and it keeps the car kind of pointing in the direction that we want it to go. So they're not top of the list of upgrades. I think it's a fairly subtle thing on this kind of car at this kind of speed, but It is something worth considering getting on there once you've got the other more important things on there. These are the Tamiya option parts, so they're quite a stiff, quite nice plastic link with metal balls in them. Yeah, Racing do make an aluminium version. I think in this instance I'd probably suggest going with the Tamiya parts rather than the Yeah Racing aluminium ones. Normally with suspension arms you want plastic so that you've got a bit of give in the system, so that when if you have a crash, if you hit something, there's a little bit of flex rather than it being completely rigid. Because if everything's completely solid and you have a crash, then you risk breaking a bulkhead or snapping a chassis or something like that, or you risk the part just bending and staying bent. Whereas with the plastic you've got a little bit of give. So I'd suggest going with these Tamiya parts. The price is about the same whether you go with the Yeah Racing ones or the Tamiya plastic, and I think overall the Tamiya plastic ones look like a good option. And it's also a little bit nicer in that because the adjuster is into plastic, the plastic will kind of keep the turnbuckle adjuster kind of pinched and stay in place, whereas on the aluminium ones you have to kind of lock a grub screw up against it to keep it locked into place, which isn't very nice. So I'd probably go with the Tamiya versions of these. They do seem like quite a nice plastic, and having fitted them, the car has ended up with less slop than it had previously as well. So I think they're quite well made as Tamiya bits go. Final parts, not really essential to be honest, not by any means. I'm covering them just because this TT02R happens to have them on it, but you can see this car's got blue aluminium prop shaft and prop joints front and rear. I think the standard TT02 comes with a plastic prop shaft, so I think as you start to go faster, you'll find the plastic prop shaft probably starts to bend and comes away from the car as you go a bit quicker. So probably an aluminium prop shaft will be something you'll want to consider, and likewise the aluminium prop joints to go with it. Probably something to add on. Fortunately, this TT02R comes with those bits, but the standard kit does not. They're a fairly inexpensive part. I think even the Tamiya parts are not too expensive. So if it's something you start to struggle with in terms of durability, with prop shafts coming off or plastic joints breaking or overheating, then it's something to consider further down the line. I think it's one of those things, if it becomes a problem, sort it. Until then, don't worry about it, kind of thing. I've not seen major problems with it. I don't think it's one of the big things that happens to these cars. That's it for now for this video. I'll probably cover a bit more about setup and a bit more about the SportsTC class in a separate video, but that covers the main things in terms of option parts that are available for the TT02 range, which is by far the most popular car that we see at Bedworth in the entry-level class. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.